Okay, so basically, modern architecture in Cohasset has oftentimes been overlooked. And what we'll do is, today we'll start off with a general context of modern architecture, and then we will go specifically to two houses. So the second part of the presentation. So basically what happens is that Royal Barry Wills, produced a lot of houses, and people associate him with capes. The reality is he produced houses in about 6 different styles, and one of those styles was the modern house. Illustrated within this book is a modern house that was designed by Elliot Noyes, one of his employees. So Noyes was working full-time on modern houses for Royal Barry Wills. Eventually he went off on his own and became a famous modernist architect. There was another architect that did, again, modern architecture, who worked for Wills as well. But people overlook the fact that he created some of those houses. And over on Deep Run, one of the houses that, out of the 17 houses that he created in his development, that you see there in green, this is the old Bowles estate. And one of the houses within that development was actually a modern architecture house. So, here you have Royal Barry Wills creating a modern house in Cohasset. Unfortunately, that house has been, it's either been torn down or it's been so altered by the new owners that you wouldn't have any idea that it ever was a modern house. Okay? Now, people think of the McMansions that have been built over the last 20 years in Cohasset, and they think those are a world apart from modern architecture. Actually, they're very closely linked to modern architecture. The difference is that the McMansions have a different exterior than modern architecture. However, the concepts of internal use of space within modern architecture have been incorporated into McMansion architecture. And so if you go into the McMansions, you'll see some of these huge rooms, or you'll see transitions from one living space to another without any hint of a door. Those are concepts borrowed from modernism. Another one of the features with McMansions, you'll see some very large windows with panoramic views. That's another one of the basic components of modern architecture. Modern architecture is not so much about the exterior appearance of the building. Modern architecture is actually about the living experience within the space. And so it's what is the living experience of the space that constitutes modern architecture. And what you're going to see as you look through these homes that we're looking at today, the first one we don't get into, but the next two we're going to see some inside scenes. And when you see them, you'll say, oh yeah, that's definitely modern architecture. But then you'll also be able to say, gee, that modern architecture kind of looks a lot like what we see within McMansions. And that link is one that people have oftentimes overlooked. Okay, let's try the next slide. Now, there's a modern house in Cohasset that was built by a highly respected scholar. It's on a very well-traveled road, and not even the neighbors realize they've got this wonderful piece of modern architecture 2 doors down from their house. Okay? So, where could this possibly be? Well, in one of our other courses, I showed this exact same photograph. it's sort of a photograph of trucks, but you'll notice behind the trucks there's a house. And that house is actually a nice example of modern architecture. Does that look familiar to you now?
It does, that's right, yeah.
2 doors down?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. That's
Okay.
right.
So what happened in the previous course, we were talking about the Higgins houses that were built on the northern edge of the harbor, overlooking the harbor. And we talked about how it's hard to travel up in there today because in addition to the original Higgins houses, you have these other houses that have been built in between them. And this is an example of one of those houses that's been subsequently built. Now, you might be wondering, what's the relationship between the poet Dante, who lived back in the 1200s and 1300s, and this piece of architecture in Cohasset? The reality is that that Cohasset building probably would never have been built had there not been Dante. And this is the fellow, okay? This is Antonio Mastrobuono. And Antonio Mastrobuono was born in 1937 in Italy. 2 years after he's born, World War II breaks out. Sometime after World War II, he emigrated to the United States. Was late getting to Providence College, but he did go to Providence College and earn his bachelor's degree. Apparently college went well for him because he subsequently went to Harvard University and earned his doctor's degree. So he graduated with his doctorate from Harvard in 1973. And he immediately became a professor. I don't know where he was working as a professor, but I do know that he was working as a professor, and I believe in the New England area, probably either in Massachusetts or Rhode Island, from 1973 until 1980. Along the way, he meets up with some artist, a lady named Diana, and he marries her. And so he's got an artistic wife, and he's married. He becomes a fairly successful person, professional person, and so therefore he has enough money so that he can afford to have a summer home. Well, as luck would have it, his career is taking off. He's becoming the national authority, or one of the international authorities on the poet Dante. And so in 1980, he received an appointment to the University of Chicago, which is an excellent university. And he became a professor there, and he stayed there for the rest of his career up until 2005. These are the books that he wrote. And as you look at this book with the Italian title is the same as that book with the English title. So the book was originally published in Italian, and it was of such significance that it was republished in English. This is a series of essays that he wrote about Dante. And then these two books, these are volume 1 and volume 2. So it's the same book in the sense that it's the same title, but there's two different books to the work. So he was a major scholar on Dante. That's the guy that built this modernist house. Now, why are we saying it's modernist? Well, you've got this very broad peak. See how the roof is low, it's not a high-pitched roof? You've got the gable end facing towards the road, which is unusual in America to begin with. But with the gable end facing the road, you can see it's a very long span from one wing over to the other. So that in itself is different than your conventional roof line. And then you'll notice it cantilevers out over space. And the windows, there are various sizes, but they're all rectangular windows, or most of them are. Up here, you get some that are cut off and actually become triangles. But the material here, it's stucco for the most part, and then over here to the left, this portion is wood. I'm not sure whether that wood portion is original to the house or whether that was a later addition.
They did add on to it.
On that side?
Yeah. And then
Okay.
in the back.
I thought they
Yeah, the
added
back,
on in the
yeah.
back.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't know about the side, but I know in the back, it used to be all glass on the side.
yeah, and the reason it was glass on the side, it was a solarium.
Yes, right,
Okay,
yeah,
so the solarium then would have been an addition on the side
Right.
then.
yeah.
So this house was erected in 1977. And the fact that Diana was a artist, I think that she probably said, I want this to be in a style that I really like. I like this modernist style of architecture. And my guess is they probably hired an architect. I don't know who the architect was. But if one wanted to investigate deep enough, that type of information can be found. But, you know, it's a wonderful house. I think it gets overlooked, and hopefully you won't get in an accident driving down Margin Street, but if you could just slow down a little bit and look up on the hill, you might see that there and say, that's a nice example. Now, if you think about the professor's career, he gets the job at the University of Chicago in 1980, and so as a consequence of that, they spend the summer of 1980 moving to Chicago. They put the summer house on sale, the Cohasset home on sale, and they sell it in the fall to the Bennetts. Do you remember the Bennetts living in
No,
that house?
I don't.
Okay.
No.
Well, that would have been 40 years ago, so
Okay.
I've forgotten a few things in
Yeah.
40
He
years.
was just a kid then.
You know, this photograph shows you the facade as it looked earlier on. This is a photo that was taken by David Wadsworth back in 1990, before the new trees. See how the view today is blocked by those trees? Those trees have come in with the new owner. But you'll see that the original view, you had this wonderful second floor deck up here, and again, very modern style to that deck. But it was a deck space where you could sit out there and look out down on the harbor. This is up on that hill with all those Higgins houses. And so you're looking down onto the harbor. Phenomenal view. And that's typical of these modern architectures. They have tremendous views inside the house, and they oftentimes have decks with tremendous views on the exterior. So I think that this is a helpful photograph of what the house originally looked like. Okay, then they sell it in 1980. Okay, then we have the Tebbets house, which is, I'm going to concentrate on the exterior because frankly, that's not what these modern houses are about. It's the use of the space inside that they're actually about. But as you come up to the house, and as I drove up to the house, Chartis was standing up here, "Hi, Bob," waving. And so, basically, you know, it's a wonderful area. as you come up, it looks like a chalet. You'll notice that the roof line is much flatter than a chalet. Chalets want to shed snow. They're in snow country, and so they have an A peak to the roof. This is a much broader peak. But you see how this resembles what we were just looking at down on Margin Street? This is what's called a deck house. And the company is still in business, it's thriving. It's called the Acorn Deck House Company. And they've produced over 20,000 houses. Some are in the deck house style, some are in a modified version of the deck house. They literally build all over the world, but most of those 20,000 houses have been built in the United States. But you'll notice this is a huge deck right here, and this is basically the living space in the summer. Now this is where they're outside in the summer. They've got this overhang. You see how part of the deck extends inward from the house with an overhang over it? So they've got an area where they can get out of the sun, and then they have the other area, the longer area, where they can be in the sun. That's a big part of the use of that house. As soon as you come up to the front steps, you go, wow, this house is different. The landing is cantilevered. It seems to be floating in space, and it's not solid. You'll notice what they've done with the boards here. These boards are quite deep. It's almost like the width of the boards is probably 1 3/4 inches, but the depth of the board is maybe 3.5, 4.5 inches. But they've turned them on edge, so they're strong, you know. But it's a neat way of doing it, but it's just say, you're coming into a different experience. Okay, this shows some of the cantilevering. This is one of the windows on the first floor, and as you're walking around the foundation, you've got this beam that's projecting out into space. That photo doesn't, it's a little darker than what I would like. This is the southwest, this is one half of the southwest side of the house. I believe that this wood is stained, isn't it?
Yes.
As opposed to being painted. Stain basically does not require as much maintenance as paint does. And that's another thing about these modern houses. One of the basic concepts is make that house so that it doesn't require a ton of maintenance. It should be a low maintenance house to maintain. So that's one of the concepts. From this point of view, you can see that there's a lower floor and an upper floor. So you've got 2 floors there. And here we're looking to the other side on the southwest side, and you can see the way that the wall for the second floor is projecting out. So here's the wall of the first floor, here's one of the beams. This house makes extensive use of, exclusive use of post and beam construction, and none of this is hidden. The beams and the posts are out in very visible form. This cantilevered construction is one of the features you see in many modern homes. Okay, this is looking up towards that deck that we saw coming into the house from the driveway. Basically, over here to the right is the living room, and then you see how the wall drops back, and here there's a sliding window. That's a sliding door. That enters into the kitchen. So the kitchen is the space that leads out onto the deck. And as a result, the kitchen has windows on this side, which is the southeast side, and that side, the southwest side. They also have windows on the northwest side. So that's one of the aspects of a modern house. You have a lot of windows, you have a lot of natural light coming into the house. As we walked through the house taking photographs and talking about the construction and whatnot, we weren't throwing light switches on and off. It's just natural light. You know, it's bright natural light no matter where you walk within the, well, maybe the garage you needed to turn on lights. But other than that, you know, these modern homes, because they have so much window space, they're letting in a tremendous amount of light, and that is your source of illumination during the day. Okay, this is that space by the front door that I had another photograph of. Here you can see the way it cantilevers out more. And you see this series of windows as you go along here. That shows that cantilever again. This is the side that faces the ocean. This is actually the northeast side. And the northeast side, even though this house is back, I think we said something like maybe 150 or 200 yards from the ocean, the salt spray actually gets onto these windows. And so that's one, if you can think there's a problem with being on Jerusalem Road, even being set back a couple of 100 yards from the ocean, during storms, so much salt spray gets kicked up that it actually gets onto their windows. And you know, this is one aspect of maintenance that you know, Ned hadn't anticipated when the house was built, but it's one that they do have to deal with. Another aspect of this, from this view, you can see the way that those windows have sort of a mirrored edge to them. And from a distance, there's a tendency to make them very darkish looking. However, they also give you privacy on the inside. With all of the window space that you have here, and with all the illumination within the space, you would think, oh my heavens, those people mustn't have a bit of privacy in there. But actually, you see how you're not seeing anything beyond that glass? The glass is functioning as a mirror, and there's not any loss of privacy in the house. Notice also that these windows, they're rectangular, but they're single pane. They're single pane in the sense that they don't have a bunch of battens running across and up and down. And so when you look out from this space, you see continuous space. It's not broken up into, you know, 8-inch blocks that you're looking through. It's one full sweep. The glass itself, they've been replacing the original glass. One of the good things about Acorn Deck Company is that they're a highly professional company, and they're very successful, and they continue to provide whatever backup is needed. And so as they're constructing houses now, they're building into them these double pane windows. And they're building double pane windows of exactly the same size. So when it came time for the Tebbets family to replace the windows in the house, they found that they could get a better deal by going right back to the deck company. I've had a cold, so that's why I have to drink a little bit. Well, I like to drink it.
That is water, right?
So the deck company is a highly honest company, and they're selling these things you know, at the best price that people can get them for. It's not like they're trying to gorge people. And so, you know, it's nice to know that there's a company out there that you can go back with and deal with. But that's why they've got such a wonderful reputation. Okay, so I think we've said enough about that picture. This is the northwest side of the house. This side of the house doesn't get any sunlight, any direct sunlight. So if you were going to have a side of the house where you were not going to have a lot of window space, this is where you would put it. However, you'll notice that there are these two very tall windows. Actually, they go right up to just underneath the pitch of the roof. At the end of the house here, you have two bedrooms on the second floor. And these bedrooms each have a very long closet along most of its wall. And then, beyond the closet, they have this window that's recessed back, which makes an interesting feature to have a recessed window. But this window goes with that bedroom, that window goes with that bedroom. So that's the way that those windows are allocated to the two different spaces inside. Here you can see the windows better. I believe that this lower window opens, doesn't it? It has a crank, and so it will drop.
Okay, the bottom part comes out.
The bottom part swings out like that. And then the top part is fixed in position. If you don't put down the shade or close the blind at night, there'll be pulses of light, like mystery light.
What the hell's going on?
A lighthouse. So the lighthouse that they've relit, is it Boston Light or Allerton?
It's Boston Lighthouse.
It's Boston Light, so it's a functioning lighthouse. Boston Lighthouse is shooting light that gets picked up in that window. So they you know, they have
Just in the wintertime.
a blind that drops down here. In the summertime, there's trees that prevent the light from reaching them. Okay? More on the second floor. We get into some of the living space, and, you know, very distinctive of the deck houses are the exposed beams, and these beams are exactly 8 feet across from each other. The houses are actually built in a factory in Acton, Massachusetts. They're built in pots. The pots are not assembled in Acton, but each panel is put together in Acton. And then they ship them down to the site, and they're assembled on the site. So that's why deck houses go up fairly quickly. They're a version of a prefab house. It's not like they arrive at the site prefabricated, but they arrive at the site with all of the panels, and then the panels are fit into place. But these beams that you see here, these are typical. Another one of the features about the deck houses are these ceilings. From this side it's a ceiling, from the other side it's a roof. And those boards, you know, in a typical house, the boards or the plywood is like 1 inch thick. These boards are actually like beams themselves. These are about 3.5 or 4 inches thick. Now, the side that you're seeing, that's something like 6 inches wide. But if you go up into the wood, it goes up about 3.5 or 4 inches. So each one of these is a massive piece of wood. And you can see that they've also got pretty good length to them. But that's the construction that you see throughout the house.
You have pine?
Is it spruce?
Yeah, what kind of wood is the ceiling?
Is this,
Is it pine, spruce, what is it?
No, I forget.
Fir? Fir?
Cedar, I think.
cedar, okay.
Maybe it's cedar.
So what happens is you've got the beams, and you can see here, the beams are supported by a post. So, since the basic mode of construction, the basic means of supporting the building are posts and beams, this is referred to as post and beam construction. I lose weight and then my pants fall.
Suspenders.
Ned, I forgot who the manufacturer of this chair was.
Love it.
It was made in Copenhagen, and it's a Hans Wegner chair, and it's become a very valuable chair. We bought it brand new in 1962, and I think it's worth considerably more than we paid for it.
Well, you tend to buy things and they appreciate, don't you?
You know,
I think this piece of land you bought for $17,000?
7,500,
Oh, only 7,500. It was real cheap then, huh?
and it was worth over $1 million now.
How's
So,
it going, Ned?
you know, I'd like to have you investing my money.
What year was that?
It was built 1961.
So the house was built in 1961. In 1962, they made a trip over to Copenhagen and they purchased furniture for the living room, which includes the chair that you see there. Oh, these pictures are out of sequence, but you'll have to live with me. I
They're
wanted,
good quality pictures, Bob.
well, I'm glad you would appreciate them. What happens as a way of providing shade and privacy at night, you do have rolled up curtains that you can pull, you know. Does this operate with a switch or
Pull it, no, the rope.
You have to do it by
See the
hand.
rope?
there's a rope? Oh,
Yeah.
this rope right here.
Right.
So that rope will lower this and give you privacy in the evening if you want it.
The main reason that was done, was to make it warmer inside. 'Cause
It insulates.
originally single pane windows.
Yeah, so this is quilted.
Those are Don Kent's best.
Ron Kent, one-time
I
meteorologist.
remember
Yeah.
Right.
for like 50 years,
Yeah.
meteorologist at WBZ Radio and TV. Back when that was a big thing.
Yeah.
Do you use these at this
Well,
point?
about 6 years ago, we replaced the single pane windows with double pane, and now we don't need to use those for keeping it warm in the room. But as you say, if you want privacy at night, you can drop them down.
Okay. Now, this is what it's about. You know, it's the views. It's these phenomenal panoramic views. That's what modern architecture gives you the opportunity to have. So you're not living inside of a box. What's happening is, because you've got these windows, you're living within nature. Okay? Nature is coming in through those windows to you. And that's what modern architecture is about. That's why they have all those windows. And you can see Ned is standing fairly close and looking out. I believe this is in the living room, but no, this is actually, is that?
That's the living room.
Okay, so this is the living room, and he's looking out. You can see that the wall in the living room comes up about waist high, but this is the view that he has. But I'm across the room, I'm on the other side of the living room, looking out, and you can see that panoramic view. You don't have to go up and stand next to the window in order to see these fabulous views. Any place in the room, this is what you look out and see. Okay. This is some more of the Copenhagen furniture that he bought. And now we go to the dining room. I'm hungry, so. Now, what happens is the modern houses have stock walls, and therefore the furnishings are where you make a statement about the people living in the house and your sense of design. And the table that you're looking at here, this is the living room table.
Dining room.
Dining room table. I get confused sometimes. This is a dining room table. This was made by one of the furniture makers up in New Hampshire. New Hampshire has a group called the New Hampshire Master Furniture Makers. And that group was created about 25 years ago. 25 years ago, of course, I was in my prime as a writer, and I was covering this fabulous event that they would put on every summer. And by that time, George Bush was president, so he wasn't coming to this event. But do you remember John Sununu?
Yeah.
Okay, so John Sununu was there, and the governor of Massachusetts came up. I mean, it was a big social event. You had, celebrities driving around with Lent vehicles, Corvettes and everything, coming up and down the main drag in Manchester, New Hampshire. It was a wild time.
Sununu, father and son have been governor and U.S. senator in New Hampshire.
Yes, yeah. The younger one is Chris Sununu. And actually, at one time, they were both bidding on a piece of furniture. I guess someone in the family wanted it. But like John Sununu was sitting down front with the celebrities, and his son Chris is standing up in the back, and he's bidding on this piece. And they didn't know they were bidding against each other. After the auction, after the bidding's over, I think John Sununu stands up and says, "Who the hell's bidding against me?" It turns out to be his son. Yeah, so what happens is that this piece of furniture was made by one of those craftsmen. It's a tremendous elliptical shaped table. And you notice it's got a small line in the middle. It looks like it might possibly have a crack there, but it's not a crack at all. What happens is underneath the table, you've got this mechanism. And by turning this lever here, it becomes possible to pull the table out, and now they have leaves that fit in, so that when the three sons come to visit, you've got plenty of seating space there at the table. It's a phenomenal table. But that's the type of thing that you do within a modern house to really give it a punctuation, is you make the statement with the furnishings that you put inside it. Another feature of a modern house, you have these open spaces. So you just transition. You walk from one space to the next. This is the dining room. That's the living room. Out here's the hallway. There's no door. So you've eliminated the door. Not only have you eliminated the door, but look at the trim. You see how there's no trim along here? This is, again, minimize the amount of maintenance necessary to take care of the house. And the chimney that you can see part of here, you can already see it's quite huge. And this is another one of those decor items that's added that provides punctuation. This is a chandelier hanging in the dining room, and it's got this very metallic, surface and modern design to it. That's the same chandelier. But here you've got it on as,
Is that Vanna White?
I think so. But, you know, this is what you do with a modern house. Now,
Oh, that's nice.
as you're at one end of the dining room and you're looking out toward the hallway, this almost looks like a painting, but
Yeah,
this
it
is
does.
an open space.
Yeah.
Okay, so, you know, that's another thing that they've done in the modern house, and you see this in the McMansion. You know, sometimes you're in a McMansion and there's a cutout in the wall, and you're looking through, and that gives you the sense that the space is even larger because you're seeing beyond the original space. And that's what they've done here. They've cut that out and created a shelf.
There's one door.
One door.
The cook likes to be by himself.
The cook likes to be by herself, okay. Well, even here, where they have used the door, you'll notice that there's no
Right,
molding
true. Yeah.
around the frame of the door. And you can see the windows over the living room right here, over the dining room. So the dining room has these windows, but they're at some elevation. Here you can see the fireplace,
See-through
and what happens is the chimney is actually 8 feet wide. So everything in the house is built on this 8 foot, 8 foot, 8 foot, because that's the space between the beams. And this chimney is 8 feet wide. You can see that about half of the width of the chimney is the fireplace. So the fireplace is about 4 feet wide. It looks attractive, and it probably is attractive when there's a fire there, but there's a matching opening on the opposite side. And as a result, when you have a fire going, you're suffering some heat loss on, you know, both the front side and the back side. So it's not a way to heat your house, but it's a way of certainly having a beautiful space. You know, fire obviously adds to the warmth of a setting, a gathering.
Do you use that fireplace?
No. You used it when you first built it.
Yes, we did.
That was when we had single pane glass windows. But it's almost overwhelming with the space. If it's going, it can make it too hot, you know, because of the size of it.
Take a lot of wood.
Mm.
Shardis, what do you do for heat? What do you have for your heat in the house?
We use oil.
Yeah.
Forced
And do you
hot
have
air.
registers or?
We have solar panels. on
Oh,
the
okay.
roof, So but that doesn't provide
No.
heat, just cheaper power.
Oh, yeah.
But in the wintertime, the main difference was when, the original house had single pane windows and no quilted blinds.
Right, yeah.
So the first thing that was done was the quilted blinds,
Yes.
and then when we needed to replace some of the windows, we got the double pane.
Yeah.
And it's warm as toast on the
Oh, it's great,
inside.
yeah, yeah.
I use a thermostat now.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
How are we doing for time?
We are at 1:48.
Okay, we can keep going a little further here.
With that piece in the window there above the front doors is another example of sort of a Frank Lloyd Wright type of thing.
Yes, it is.
Yes, so
That's not
This-
the window.
this,
That's a-
this may not be obvious to everybody what we're looking at here. Remember earlier I showed you an opening between the walls? So the place where I'm standing now, I'm looking through that opening. So I'm in the dining room and I'm looking here into the hallway. However, at the far side of the hallway, over the door, there is this stained glass panel. And that's what you're seeing there. Here at the top of this opening is actually a shelf. And that shelf is quite wide. It's maybe 25, 26 inches wide. And that shelf was actually for growing plants. And you can see that there are some plants there. And here, this is that same shelf again. Up above, you can probably see this long bulb. So that's a grow light bulb. And the purpose of that was to provide light for the plants that were there. And also you could use that as a nursery, so you could do clippings and stick them down into the dirt and then get a little plant to start growing. A cutting it's called. Okay, and then they have a kitchen in this house.
You don't come for lunch every day here?
Now, sometimes you have to look out the window if you're in the kitchen. Well, the least desirable of the windows to look out is the one that's on the northwest side of the house. Excuse me, the southwest side of the house. However, it's not a totally bad view. This is what you see if you look out the windows on the southwest side of the house. This building up here, that's the Moores estate. Now, it's been partially, removed, so it's not the entire estate house, but that's the portion of the Moores estate house that remains in place. And if that's the worst thing you've got for a view, I think you got some pretty good stuff to look at. Of course, come the summertime, not only do you have this holly tree, but you've got all kinds of other vegetation out there. So, not a bad view for number 3 of views. But this is the view that you get if you look to the northeast window. So now we're going in the opposite direction. And you're looking out. This is your kitchen view. This is not a bad kitchen view, people. But that's the thing about these modern houses. They're designed and positioned in such a way as to figure out what's the best possible view and then to maximize that opportunity to have that view. And use it in places like a kitchen where you're in there a lot. What room gets used more than the kitchen does? So it's kind of nice to have phenomenal views there.
My bulletin board.
Your bulletin board. Well, this is meant to show cabinets. So one of the issues is if you've got a lot of phenomenal windows within the kitchen, do you have any cabinet space? And the reality is that there's 2 corners like this which do not have windows, and therefore you have a lot of cabinets. And so there is a sufficient number of cabinets. Don't you feel that way, Charles?
Never know.
Never. I thought there were enough, but I mean,
They're like
that's
shoes,
Okay, and then you have this piece of art on the wall in the kitchen, and this reminds me when I was working on my master's degree down at Wesleyan. We had an exhibit one time, and the exhibit was all works of art of this sort. And I'm like, wow, this looks like 1970. So I asked Ed, when did you get this thing? He says, geez, I don't remember, but maybe about 10 years after we bought the house. Well, that's 1970. So, this type of art existed for a very short period of time. But it's kind of fun to walk in and say, wow, that's authentic 70s art. This isn't repro 70s stuff.
Apples, plums, grapes.
Okay, and here you're again looking out that window up towards the Moores estate. The purpose of this picture is to show you that within the kitchen and the bedrooms, you have some of these windows, that do open. You see how there's a crank here? And you can see that this window is in an open position.
Is there a screen?
Yes,
Is there a what?
screen.
Screen, yes.
It's removable, but we don't take that inside.
I see, yeah.
Okay, this is the view if you look out the window to the southwest. Again, not a bad view. So the views from the kitchen,
No.
That's northwest.
Northwest.
this northwest?
Northeast. excuse me.
Northeast, that's the northeast view
That's
there.
from the bedroom,
That's the ocean.
Oh, this is from the bedroom?
yeah,
I'm sorry.
no problem.
Next lecture, we'll get it right.
I don't know. I get them right 2 or 3 shows. It takes 2 or 3 shows to get them right, but I eventually do. So this is from the kitchen. This is a view from the kitchen. And so what happens is you've got the pitch of the roof right here, and you see how there's a window that's up in the pitch of the roof? And then you get these tall windows here. And, you know, once again, a wonderful view out that window. This is Ned standing in the kitchen, and he's explaining to me that it doesn't matter which way you look. You know, you can look out this window, you can look out that window, but either way, you're going to have a fabulous view. And that's what modern architecture is actually about. It's the living space within the house. It's not what does the building look from the exterior. And what's also great about this photograph, it shows you that you walk from the kitchen through this sliding door onto this deck. And this is where they spend a lot of their time in the summertime. You've got this shaded area of deck here, and then running the whole length of the side of the house,
Yeah.
you've got the sunny deck as well. It's a beautiful space.
Exactly. Kind of looks like he's telling you it's time to go.
He probably was trying to give me that hint. You know. I never know when it's time to go. Now, I had a problem trying to photograph the deck outside because the sun was coming directly across, so I had to get into the shade to take the photograph. But this shows you that even the railing here, you've got a modern style to the treatment of the railing.
And that's a rubber surface that we, seems to do the best job of keeping the building from, you know, developing leaks and stuff.
Yeah.
But in the summer, we have a roll-up rug that we put on.
Yeah.
Indoor,
Make it
outdoor
nice and
rug.
Indoor,
Well,
outdoor
you burn
rug.
your feet on there, I suppose.
You would,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
That's what we try to avoid.
So you have a rug and you didn't put it out for my
You
visit?
didn't tell us you were coming.
You can visit us in the summertime, Bob.
Okay, how are we doing for time now?
158.
1:58. Why don't we take a 10-minute break, and at 8 minutes past 2, we'll resume, okay? You probably have all woken up. I'm sorry there wasn't a strong enough coffee to keep you awake during the first half. Basically, I was asked at halftime, what's the situation with the next course? When's that going to start? Well, you might remember from the other years, in the winter, I like to schedule in a snow day. And so there's a snow day at the end of this course. This course has one more class to go. That will be next week, unless it snows. And then the following week has been designated as a snow day. So, you know, maybe we'll not need to use it, but if it snows next week, then we get the snow day. So the next course therefore begins March 3rd. And the next course is going to be.
That's Super Tuesday instead of
Is it Super Tuesday?
Super Tuesday.
Oh, you won't be able to be here then.
Isn't it?
No, we can be here.
Okay, so what happens, it's going to be March 3rd, and the name of the course is going to be Cohasset's Maritime History Settlement to 1800. And so, you know, if you can't do the entire maritime history in one 6-week course, but we're taking a slice of it from the period of settlement up until 1800, and by taking that small section, we probably will be able to properly cover the maritime history.
So you're saying if there's no snow day, then we have a 1 week off?
You've got 1 week off in
Okay.
effect, yes.
All right.
Is that what your calendar's telling
That's
you?
what my calendar's telling me.
Okay. So March 3rd is the start of the next course.
Gotcha.
Is that 6 weeks of what?
That's going to be another 6-week course, yes. I'm thinking of doing a 2-week course on Native Americans at some point, but the next course is going to be a 6-week course. And that's going to be, you know, the maritime history course.
Now, is it true this is a buy 10, get 1 free class? Just thought I'd try.
Well, you know,
No comment.
these courses work out pretty well. It's good, the Historic Society, you know, co-sponsors the courses. So you've got the Historic Society and the Senior Center putting on the program. Okay, so basically, we're still on the second floor. We haven't gotten off the second floor of the Tebbets house. But now we're going to the bedroom where we can get a good snooze. Basically, this is the view from the bedroom window. No? I had that,
No, you're,
I'm
I
right,
think that's right.
okay?
that's
So,
the edge of that little illegal balcony off the living room.
why do you call that
Because it
illegal?
doesn't have a barrier between the top railing and the floor.
Well, it would be illegal by current standards, but.
It was legal at the time.
It was legal at the time, and because it was pre-existing, it doesn't have to meet the modern code,
But
yes.
if it were to sell it, it probably would.
Bring your chihuahua up there.
But basically what happens is, this, you know, if you wake up in the morning and you don't feel like getting out of bed, this is what you have to look at. I mean, that's not a really bad view, but that's what you see from, you know, sitting in your bed there.
And that view angle there can never be built on.
Yes, yes, so if we go back here a bit, what happens is we're looking out here, and this area out here is Moore's Rocks. And Moore's Rocks are restricted so that they cannot be built upon. And so that view is like, you know, you no matter what goes on with building around the area, that view is never going to be obstructed. So that's nice to have that. This is the wall in the bedroom. This is the large closet that I told you about. You can see you've actually got 4 doors here. And,
Three. The
That's
middle-
oh, so the middle door has 2 handles.
That's right.
Okay. Sorry about that. So you've got the windows here. Clearly you've got this pitched roof that we've talked about before. And as you come to the end of the closets, you actually have a recessed space that goes back about 2.5 feet to this window. And this is the lower window, and this has a crank, I think, that you can open. And then you have this larger piece. And this is the piece I was talking about before that goes right up to the peak of the roof on the side of the house. So that lets in quite a bit of light into this space. And here's that recess space right here. And that's kind of a neat little thing to have. It adds interest to the room to have that little niche. Okay, then we go down to the first floor. And this is about 1/3 of the playroom on the first floor. You can see that they play with the computer these days. But once there were children playing here. The door to the outside, you can see that there's a sliding door right there, and that's your access to the backyard. Okay, here's your fireplace. Again,
This is the living room.
no, this is the fireplace in the basement.
See the stairs on the right-hand
Yeah,
side?
you're right, sorry. Why did I think that hanging was
Okay?
Okay.
But this is an 8-foot wide space. The fireplace itself is about half of that space, so that's about a 4-foot opening. And you'll notice the brick that you see here. This is used brick. And, you know, used brick in order to give you that mixed surface. So now you've got different colors, and you know, it's had some weathering from use. So you get all different effects as you look at the different bricks within that chimney. And then as far as the ceiling, once again you have the same type of boards here. They're about 6 inches wide, and they go about 3.5, 4 inches in a
It's a double tongue and groove.
Yes, that's the other unusual feature about these. They're not just tongue and grooved on one side, it's double tongue and grooved. So it's, I guess when workmen come in to work on these, it's like, if you have to drill through there to
Yeah.
put through an electric wire or
Yeah.
something, it just makes the job.
Just keeps going, and
really-
you must wonder what's wrong. You keep
Yeah,
going and
yeah.
going and going.
They've had that experience
I'll
with
bet.
some service people that come to the house. And then here you've got your staircase going up. Again, very simple, you know, stock. It's not going to take a lot of work to maintain that. And then this is the heating source. This is the furnace room. So in the basement, you've got the furnace room, the garage, it's a double garage. You've got the playroom, and you've got, what, 2 more bedrooms? And of course, you have a bath both up and down. And now we go to the Gropius House. It's called Gropius House after the architect. The family that actually had the house built for them were the Haggerty families. What happened is that Josephine Haggerty was a student up at Harvard, and they wanted to build a house for the grandmother, and so she thought that, you know, Harvard could design a modern house for the grandmother to live in. So that's what led to the building of this house. This shows the south side of that house, and it carries one of the themes that I've talked about from the beginning of this course. Remember I said from the very first day that rocks are a big part of Cohasset's landscape, and so architects like to take rocks from Cohasset and incorporate them into their buildings. And notice this wall, this end of the house, it's all made from rock. Okay, it's not stucco, it's not wood, it's rock. And that rock is not only visible from the exterior, it's also visible from the interior. Now, this photo wasn't taken the year the house was built, but it shows this portion of the house in the original condition. The style is called the International Style. And part of the International Style, Gropius came from Germany, where he headed the Bauhaus school, and he was in charge of their architecture. As things got difficult in Germany, he came over to America and got a position as the head of the architectural school at Harvard. That was in 1937. So he arrives in 1937 and he builds a house for himself up in Lincoln, Massachusetts. So there's a famous Gropius House, I believe it's a museum now, up in Lincoln, Massachusetts. One of the concepts of the International Style is to use manufactured materials. And I point that out with this slide because you see the railing that you have here? And that railing is just piping, you know? And, you know, the way that they bend piping within a pipe vise, you know, that's how they bent the corners here. And so that's the material. And that's the same material that's used on the first floor, which is actually, it's a three-story house. So it's actually the second floor. And then coming down here to the beach. Okay, so that's just standard industrial piping. Gives you some sense. As you look at this, it looks like a stucco house. It's actually not. Those are white boards that have been painted. So I don't think it's stained. I think it's painted white. Now, this shows you the part of the house that the fight was about. So the Haggertys had this house built in 1938. 1948, after 10 years in the house, it was decided that this sun porch over here was fabulous, but we needed to have more space to live in. So what the Haggertys did is they enclosed it. And so where there used to be a sun porch in this area right here, they put this new part of the building on. Now Gropius was an artist. He considered his architecture to be works of art, and he did not want any changes in the house. The fact that the Haggertys changed the house caused a falling out between the two parties. And so that was sort of the end of the relationship. Prior to that time, Gropius was using this house to promote his business. He was using it in advertising and whatnot to promote, this is what a beautiful house can be like. You know, you can buy a house, I will design a house for you in this modern style. You'll notice another feature is that they've got this little court that's set here. You can access the court from the bottom story, the lower of the 3 stories. So from the road, this looks like a 2-story house. It's actually 3 stories. And this lower story, you've got this enclosed courtyard, which is a private space. But once again, this is like we saw with the Tebbets house. You have an area here which is outdoors, but it's still sort of in the architectural framework. And this becomes part of your summer living. So the idea was not that you would just live inside the house, but you're on the courtyard here, and then over here you're out onto the beach. So there was this continuous outdoor living was part of the concept of the house. Okay, this is a picture taken from the beach. The seawall wasn't there originally. That seawall is a later feature that was constructed. You do see the two chimneys. No, those are air conditioning units from this angle. You don't see them from other angles. Now, it turns out this house has been written about a great deal. And Haggerty was asked to summarize some of the articles that have been written about it. Tomorrow's House by Nelson and Wright, that was written in 1945. So you're just getting to the end of World War II, and the housing boom's about to start happening. Someone writes a book called Tomorrow's House, and it features this as one of the houses within it. Then you have Design of Modern Interiors by James and Catherine Ford, 1942. Then you have The Modern House in America by the same authors in 1940, featuring the house. The Architectural Forum, which was a magazine, the April 1940 issue featured this house. Featured it for only about 5 pages, but 5 pages isn't it's not too short an article. Guide to Modern Architecture, Museum of Modern Art. That's the one down in New York. 1940. They included it within their guide. Another publication called Twice a Year, 1939. They wrote about it. And Boston Answers, House and Garden. And now he just goes, etc. So, okay, there's also a whole bunch of other articles about this house. So this house has been written about a great deal. I would say at the national level it's the best known house in Cohasset.
May I ask a question about the previous slide on the windows?
Well, I suppose you could, Martha.
Are those shutters on the sides of the large
No,
windows, or
no.
are those windows?
Those are flanking windows.
Okay.
So what you're having here, this area out here is more of a public sitting space.
Yeah.
This is, probably bedrooms, and so the windows are not floor to ceiling,
Right.
but these smaller windows,
Okay.
they've broken them up into parts.
But they kind of look like shutters, and I thought, no, that doesn't look right. I mean, that is
No, that wouldn't do.
it wouldn't do, really.
But it may have been that he was trying to get the effect,
It has
He may have thought, hey, this will match it into the setting a little bit,
Oh, okay, thank you.
if we show. That's a good question, Martha, Do you have any more?
Probably.
Well,
Take time right now.
yes,
Hi,
Therese.
Is this house similar to the Gropius House in Lincoln? Pretty much?
I tell you, I haven't attempted to research the one in Lincoln, so I'm not going to say.
Well, I can answer in part. I think there is a lot of similarity. That Gropius was part of a group in Germany in the 1920s
Bauhaus.
that called the Baja School.
Yeah.
And so his architecture is sometimes called the Baja Style.
Yeah? Yeah, what happens, and this was even true when I was an undergraduate at Colby. You take an art course and they talk about modern architecture, and they say, modern architecture is all about the interior. It's the living experience of the house. And then you know what they show you? They show you all the exterior pictures. So, where's the meat, And of course, I've been showing you exterior pictures, but,
Well, people are private, they don't want you in the house.
well, I haven't attempted to get inside this house. I do think I've been very fortunate, Martha, with people in this town that have allowed me in. I mean, this is the 5th week of the course, and every week we've had pictures from inside somebody's private home, and that's because people have invited me in and said, "You're teaching that course, why don't you take pictures in my house?" You know? I mean, I was over sitting in the library reading one day, and Ned came along, and we got talking. He says, "When's the next course?" And I said, "Well, it's going to be an architecture course." He says, "Geez, would you like to photograph my house?" So, you know, that's what set that up.
I didn't have anything to say.
No.
Ned didn't tell you about that?
There is a very interesting house next door to this Gropius House,
Yeah, it's.
where it was done by a Cohasset architect. What's his name?
Jim
Sorry.
Sandell.
Jim Sandell.
Jim Sandell, yes. And he did it in a sort of a guest house, but it's also quite contemporary in style.
Yes, and I should be giving him a call about some of
Is
it.
that just built recently?
Well, there's a guest house that was built,
It's small.
Quite recently,
It's-
the last
Yeah,
4 or
yeah,
5
yeah.
years.
Right.
yeah, and it was on a house tour.
I saw it there,
Yeah,
yeah.
it was beautiful.
You know, it's right after that corner.
Yeah, I have not gotten back to Jim Sandell, but I should, because I think he would be able, maybe there'll be a part 2 to the architecture course.
It really is quite striking, the way
Yeah.
it's all arranged on that lot of land. The whole, the bigger house in the small house.
I tell you, one of the things that's distinctive across all of this Cohasset architecture is the siting of the houses on the land so that you maximize the views. You know, your house is obviously an example, but this is another. They're all maximizing these views.
Which is getting harder and harder to do because we are loose in our interpretation of zoning laws with regard to how high houses can be.
When
built.
houses grow upward, they block a lot of other people's view. That's certainly true. And that's an issue.
It is.
Okay, so the Gropius House is on the National Register of Historic Places. The Historic Society did a phenomenal amount of work in order to get this onto that listing. The packet of information is about 3/4 of an inch thick. The packet that they had to complete and submit to first the state and then to the National Park Service. But they did get that registration, so that's pretty neat. This is an ad, and it's in time, and it's talking about showroom houses of the nation, and it's featuring this Gropius House, both with interior views and exterior views. Unfortunately, it doesn't show the area that was changed. I was hoping this might be early enough that it would show the change, but it doesn't. Okay, then we have this article. What happened is that Country Homes, which was at that time a pretty big national publication, came out with this magazine once a year called Dwell Magazine, and it featured certain aspects of country homes. This particular issue is about the most inspiring homes in America, the best homes in America. And the picture on the cover is actually from the interior of the Gropius House. And so this gives you some idea of what the interior is. So you're in this space. This woman's down here in the laundry room, and look at the view outside. Not bad. And, you know, here you've got the ocean. You know, so this is down on the lower of the 3 floors, and you're looking out and you have this fabulous ocean view. It's pretty remarkable space. this is the driveway, and this is after that sunroom had been converted over into living space. The drive is lined with evergreens, and it's very hard to get a good view from the street. Someday I'm tempted to go down, sneak down the sidewalk of the driveway and snap a picture and then run back, but I don't run as fast as I used to.
Not with your pants falling.
Assistant.
Notice this wall, again, that stone material. This is that room, that outdoor courtyard that we're looking at here. But you've got the steps up to the house and then on this side, from the driveway up to the house. So this is your entryway, and you can see it's very modern. This is along the front of the house. The third floor is more obvious at this point. This is the view you have to put up with. You know? What is that? Is that Sandy Beach there?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, you can live with it.
Just have to keep the windows clean.
Yeah, imagine the world.
There's an interior view. Now, all of this series of pictures I'm showing you from Dell Magazine, actually, all the pictures of the Gropius House are from the Cohasset Historical Society. So, you know, the fact that they're supporting these courses at the senior center, I get to use a lot of their material, and that is just one of our images. But this gives you some idea of this long room that's running all the way down. Remember that wall I talked about on the exterior? This is the interior face of that same wall. And down here, you notice a fireplace that looks something like the one that you have at the Tebbets house. Okay?
Gee, no television above it.
This was taken a while ago.
Oh, yeah, maybe this one.
I'll bet there is now.
Oh my God, I hope not.
Oh,
They're everywhere.
It looks like a huge room.
Yeah.
But you know what? If you see these chairs in these pictures, now what we're doing is looking the rest of the way down.
Yep.
Okay? So that's the side of the house. That's the bottom
40
floor.
foot.
And just what a fabulous space. This is where people are coming in with wet bathing suits and stuff like that.
I hope so. You might as well enjoy it.
Yeah.
But this is what I was talking about. With modern architecture, it's not what it looks like from the exterior, but it's the living experience from the interior. And it's these fabulous views. And the idea is that you're transported, you're part of nature, rather than being in a box excluded from nature. That's the purpose of all the windows, is to make you part of the nature. And that's the staircase. You'll notice once again that there's use of that piping, you know, industrial piping. The steps, the treads are simple boards across. They're beautifully finished, of course. And you'll notice that in the back here, you don't have any boards. It's just open space.
Well, I don't think you could build that today.
You probably couldn't build
No.
it today. And, you know, that deck that we were looking at earlier,
Yeah.
that didn't have all of those ups and downs,
Yeah.
that's the same thing that,
Right.
that Charters is talking about
Yeah.
earlier. I wish I had more pictures of the interior, but I don't. Now, after the house was built, what happened is that Mary Hagedy's friends came to visit the house, and one of Mary Hagedy's friends said, it looks like the ladies' wing of Alcatraz, or a fruit crate that washed up from the beach. So, you know, some people can be nasty and biting in their comments,
Yeah.
but, you know, clearly there's a difference of opinion. Some of Mary's friends apparently thought it was a little bit too far out, but other people say it's a great masterpiece of architecture. So, I'll leave you with that thought.
Oh, I don't know.
Okay, so that's the end for today, folks. Thanks for coming. I hope that you've been able to stay awake and that you've enjoyed it and maybe learned a little bit.
Thank you, Annette, for sharing your house.
Well, you're very welcome.
Chad, is
Bob did a
that
great
great?
job in the
Thank you.
photograph and the text too.
Let me know if you ever have a
Nice
yard sale. I'll be there. I'll be an early bird.